Okay. So I will be calling this meeting to order. We're on item number 1. This meeting is being conducted with a virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the Council Sustainability Committee virtually can join the meeting on Zoom using the link or a phone number and webinar ID shown on the screen. When I announce the item on which you wish to speak, click on the raise hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When I call your name to provide public comment, if you're participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute. For in-person attendees, please fill out a speaker card, which you can find on the sign-in table to the left of the door. So we will now move on to roll call. Ms. Lee, can you take roll, please?
Member Abe-Koga.
Here.
Chair Hicks.
Here.
Member Showalter.
Here. So we're now moving on to item number 3, which is approving the minutes. These are the meeting minutes dated September 4th, 2024. Do any members have comments or questions about the meeting minutes? Okay, I think we need, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on the meeting minutes? Anyone in person, anyone virtually? No, okay, so I heard a motion.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We're now on item number 4, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes. And state law prohibits us from acting on these non-agendized items. So I see a member of the public. There's Carney.
Thank you. So I'd like to talk about ending the flow of piped natural gas or methane in Mountain View. As you probably all know, this stopping methane, ending flow has been Carbon Free Mountain View's primary goal for the last 2 years. And at this year's Earth Day event in Mountain View, we put this chart out and asked members of the public to put a sticky dot on the axis of their age and when they would like to end the flow of piped methane. I put the first dot on, 1952, 2045, and all the other dots just showed up. There were a lot of children who were putting dots near the bottom of this chart and a lot of adults who were putting dots higher up. And of course, at an Earth Day event, you'd expect there to be a pretty strong desire to be proactive in ending the flow of piped natural gas. And you can see that that is one of the things that this chart shows. But I think another thing that it shows is that when an organization like the City of Mountain View steps out and says, this is our goal, let's create an anchor in the minds of the citizenry about what is possible and what will happen in the future, people tend to sort of agree with that. In negotiations, you learn that if you set a high price to begin with, that anchors the buyer's expectation of what it should be worth. So this anchoring is just a critically important part of moving the community toward the actions necessary to end the flow of piped natural gas by any date in the future, 2035, 2040, 2045. And so I really encourage the city and this committee in particular, and the staff of the city in particular, to really begin to work on making something like this happen, to make it city policy that we're announcing to the public that there's an end date for piped natural gas, and maybe it's 2045, maybe it's some other year. But once that happens, the decisions people make, the investments they make will begin to change. And of course, all the supporting things happening with the Air District, with the state building code, with CARB, will all enhance and reinforce the decision that Mountain View makes and publicizes. So I'm not going to leave this here after the meeting, but I will leave it here until I go home because this is a chart that's very important to me personally because it confirmed what I believe, which is that Mountain View citizens are extremely forward-looking when it comes to climate. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards for public speakers. Are there any virtual speakers?
Yep, yes.
Yes.
Stephanie Lynn.
Okay, Stephanie?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll wait for the timer to go. Okay, I'm here to talk about Ridwell. So Ridwell is a private company that does semi-weekly curbside pickup for hard to recycle items. They currently pick up all through the Bay Area, including neighboring cities like Los Altos, Palo Alto, Cupertino, San Jose. Mountain View is actually an outlier in that the service does not come here. Once a city has enough local people show interest in the service by signing up on the website, Ridwell will start servicing the city. I would appreciate if the city could help promote the service to citizens so they can register their interest. And I believe that the city should be promoting all opportunities to reduce trash and encourage recycling in Mountain View. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional speakers? Okay, so we are done with item 4 and we'll move on to item 5, which is new business. 5.1 under that is the scope of services for Cascadia Consulting Group to develop decarbonization goal analysis and climate vulnerability assessment. This item will be presented by Sustainability Division staff. Ms. Lucky will commence the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Hicks. I'm Rebecca Luxey, the Sustainability Manager. And we are looking at a revised scope of services for Cascadia Consulting Group. A little bit of background on it is we discussed this topic last month at the September Council Sustainability Committee. And essentially the scope of work at the time was to develop a 2035 climate strategy. During the meeting, there was concerns raised regarding the project timeline, community engagement that was necessary to complete the project, and prioritizing the project's focus on decarbonization. As a result of that discussion, the CSC just directed staff to return with a revised scope of work to focus on the technical analysis and strategies for decarbonization and to complete a climate vulnerability assessment. Next slide. So just to kind of briefly go over what the scope of work changes are from the previous scope to where we are today or tonight. So the previous scope included developing the 2035 climate strategy, which also included a decarbonization and resiliency strategies. The estimated project completion date for this project was July of 2026. It also included robust community engagement, and the project cost was $433,320. So the project team met with Cascadia Consulting to go over the feedback we received last month, and we were able to reduce the scope and revise it in a way that includes a more technical analysis. So it's divided. So right now the project's divided into 2 tasks. The first task is to develop a decarbonization goal analysis for 2035 and 2040. And Ms. Anderson's going to go over the next few slides after this one to kind of dive deeper into what that work looks like. The second task is to complete a climate vulnerability assessment. So this was in our sustainability action plan as an item to complete. The project completion date is now moved up to being completed by the end of 2025. And there's no community engagement included as part of the project at this time. The project cost also was reduced as a result of the revised scope. So it is now $223,000.05. I'm sorry, $5, not 5 cents. And as I mentioned before, there's 2 parts to this work, the decarbonization goal analysis and the climate vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. As Ms. Lucky described, the revised scope of work includes a decarbonization goal analysis to help us determine what it would take for Mountain View to decarbonize by different target years. So as part of this, Cascadia would conduct wedge analyses for 2035 and 2040. These would lay out how we can decarbonize, taking into account emission reductions from regional, state, and federal government, as well as local programs, and it'll help us focus in on where we can make the most impact locally. The scope of work also includes evaluating the emission reduction potential of Mountain View's current policies and programs, and developing a 5-year menu of actions to consider for each decarbonization target year, so 2035 and 2040. A 5-year timeline just allows us to be more flexible and pivot if necessary, if technology, policy, market changes occur. Next slide, please. So the other task within the scope of work is the development of a climate vulnerability assessment, which is called for in the city's current sustainability action plan and the council work plan. So this assessment will identify projected climate hazards and their potential impacts on Mountain View. It will also include a social vulnerability assessment, which will just help the city understand how climate change impacts will be felt across different neighborhoods and demographics. Next slide, please. So under the new scope of work, the decarbonization goal analysis and vulnerability analysis are estimated to be completed before the end of 2025, as Ms. Lucky said. And staff will continue to solicit feedback from the CSC and council at key points throughout the project, including the review of draft and final reports. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Ms. Lucky to conclude our presentation.
So the desired outcomes for these two tasks, it's twofold. So for the decarbonization analysis, it's really to get the city to a point to adopt a more progressive target than our current target for 2045, and determine which strategies at a high level that we can undertake over the next 5 years to stay on track with that goal. And then the second part for the climate vulnerability assessment, it's really going to be a helpful tool internally and externally to kind of figure out how to, and it just inform us and educate us about which neighborhoods might be impacted the most, and to what degree, what kind of elements, storms, heat, so that we can figure out what the next steps are as far as programming, services, whether we need to do further community engagement on this topic to really understand what might be going on in certain neighborhoods or certain parts of Mountain View. So the next steps, the committee could provide a recommendation tonight to the city council to approve the revised scope of work with Cascadia Consulting Group. If approved by the committee tonight, then the next step would be to have the city council review the scope of work, which could be in November, and then we would execute an agreement in December, and work could begin in January of 2025. And that concludes the presentation. We're happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback.
Thank you very much. So do any committee members have questions?
Yeah, I guess generally I really appreciate your being very responsive to our discussion. But at the same time, we do have to have mechanisms to communicate this information to the public. So would we assume that we would do that kind of after the report was finished, or, at the draft stage when we bring it here, and we bring it to council? That would be a way to share the information with the public, just.
So it's when and how would we communicate this? to the
yeah.
public?
Yeah, I think once we get a draft of the analysis, I think that'll be a really good opportunity to figure out, do we want to ask more questions? Because the menu of options, we don't necessarily need to do all of them. They're going to be very high impact strategies. And it's maybe figuring out which ones is the city council most comfortable with, or if we need to do some level of community engagement to kind of figure out which action would the community be most comfortable with.
If I may add, I think what we were contemplating was that staff would take on sort of the lead role in terms of community engagement. It would likely happen over the course of the project because we do community engagement kind of nonstop anyhow. And so we would be finding avenues to take in feedback. We would have conversation with CSC as well about engagement opportunities. And it'll just be that the consultants won't be leading on the community engagement. We sort of know the community best. Anticipate that we'd be able to take that on.
That seems like an excellent plan. And I was also thinking, I mean, like, for instance, Earth Day is at the end of April.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know how much will be done then, but it's a great time to query, you know, as Mr. Carney was sharing with us, it's a great time to query the community about environmental issues and that kind of thing. Okay, well, that sounds like a really good answer. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, so I very much appreciate this new proposal and timing wise and also cost wise. I guess I'm still trying to understand the vulnerability assessment. Just because our city isn't, I mean, it's not very big, and I guess I'm just questioning the value of doing this versus just actually going out and doing more. Like, can we look at building a clean air center, right? So because geographically, we're not that big, I think, and going into the neighborhoods to me just seems almost maybe too microscopic. And so it's, for me, it's really just a cost benefit issue here. And looking at this and then looking at the next item, and the question I have here is, so that's number one question, and I have a second question about the funding, but yeah, I guess I'm just trying to really understand the need to do this.
There's a couple of aspects, one aspect is just being able to position ourselves for grant funding. There's quite a few grants that involve resiliency, like even battery storage and some other aspects where they do want to see a vulnerability or some progress toward resiliency and understanding the needs of the community. And the other part that I kind of touched on in the presentation was the internal needs amongst the other departments that are looking for this vulnerability study to kind of, help them understand, what is the cost for climate change damage because of storms or droughts. So we've had Public Works ask, we talked to the police department too, just about response times during extreme heat days. The biodiversity plan is another one where they've asked, when are we going to be completing this vulnerability assessment, because they would like to incorporate it as well as which plants can really withstand heat. That would be ideal to plant, or where, where there's also additional argument where to plant trees because of extreme heat as well. So it kind of helps them match up their data with what we're seeing in the vulnerability assessment.
Okay. Thank you. So my second question is, with the $200,000 reduction with the new proposal, this is going to the next item, but is that the same 200,000 that's being proposed for the water heater campaign, or is that separate?
I can answer that. Okay, yes. No, it's a separate budget that was funded through Sustainability Action Plan.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a separate project than where the budget they're both within that sustainability fund, but they were both allocated.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question. So following up on Rabbit Koga's question, can you tell me, I did look a little at this, but maybe you can sum up that now that Margaret's brought it up again. I looked it up a little in your attachments at cities roughly our size, and what Cascadia has done. Can you tell us do you know what some of the key outcomes of the vulnerability assessment for some of those smaller cities, maybe Pleasanton or something, what were they? What kinds of things do cities of our size, what are the results? And I'll just go on about it. I imagine it wouldn't be sea level rise because we've been doing that in another vein. And I'm also not sure with our biodiversity plan, are they already doing that? It sounds like you've had some communication with them. I would think they would be looking at plants that are, in a forward-thinking way in terms of, like, I've heard people talk about oaks, maybe not the oaks that are here currently, but ones that are a little south of here, like LA area or Mexico, because those are the ones that will survive. So are they already doing that? How much would they be depending on you to do that? And maybe you can add some detail or color.
Yeah, I mean, for the biodiversity plan, they're obviously taking in community feedback about what does biodiversity look like, thinking about species. And they're looking for data specifically through the vulnerability assessment, just to kind of understand, are there pockets of neighborhoods that are maybe slightly different? Because there are those micro kind of climates that you have in a community. I know we have a very small community here. But then it also relates down to, socioeconomic factors as well. And how quickly can you get emergency services to a neighborhood? How are we communicating? And it's maybe not in the traditional sense that we've been doing it over the last 10 years. And even our conversations with police, they've had to find a vehicle that can actually drive through floods. They've never had to really think about that in the last 10 years until the last recent storm events.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more we can get ahead of it to kind of understand, like, what is it we truly do need? What kind of, potential emergency response services under certain conditions will we require? Is there kind of biodiversity that can help play a role in making a neighborhood or the whole community as a whole be more resilient? I mean, it's a hard question to answer because we don't have the analysis yet. And as far as the other past plans, I think Lauren's done a lot of analysis around that.
And talk to that a bit. So generally, although it definitely varies, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, how specific and granular they get, but they'll have a list of what are the different impacts they will have in the city, and it'll be things like, for extreme heat, they'll have how many more days above 90, I forget what the exact is, but 91 degrees do we expect a year? And then there might also be things where they have maps showing, urban heat island effect. And so even though we have a small city, we probably all know from walking around the certain areas where there's, more concrete, fewer trees and stuff, and they can, layer on different data sets to kind of really understand where are the areas that we should really focus. And you're right that we have a lot of sea level rise data already. But there's also some other information we've asked them to look at, which is from wildfire, air quality impacts on the city. That's something we haven't really studied. And something else we talked to them about was the wind from storms and stuff, how we don't really have good data on that, right? That was some of the biggest impacts from the big storms the last few years. And so, some of the other jurisdictions, they have the different impacts, and then how many days that might be impacted, what municipal assets might be impacted by that, how many people, and then they usually layer on the social vulnerability data. So which populations are most susceptible to this? This might be an issue mainly for, aging adults. This might be an issue for children, that kind of thing. If you have anything to add on, hopefully that helps.
I can just share one additional example. At the County of San Mateo, we did a vulnerability assessment, and one of the first things that we did with that information was to look at our operations. The county, of course, at a county scale, has operations in many jurisdictions, but understanding our operational vulnerabilities so that we could make sure that we had continuity of operations, that we could continue to provide services. So we would look at kind of the critical places where we were providing services and have more tailored plans, knowing the kind of climatic impacts that we could expect. So there's a variety of things that you can do with the information once you have it.
Triggered another question.
I think you bring up a good point, and I guess that's what I'm trying to ascertain is the size, a county, that makes sense. It's, there's more jurisdictions, there's just more people. And for us at 85,000 residents, I guess that's what I'm still not sure about whether it's, you know, worth an $80,000 study. Like, you know, I've walked this entire city. I could tell you where the trees are and where they're not. And that's again, and to be honest too, as I look at how, you know, we've increased our staff, my question is how much of this can we do in-house too? And part of it is just that, I mean, but overall, we're just talking about, you know, in various jurisdictions now, in agencies that we're just spending a lot of money on contractors, outside contractors. And we have staff, like we have, you know, robust staff now. And so how much of this can we do in-house is my question, really.
Sure.
So it's, I think for me, more of a, yeah, again, cost benefit. And I understand in terms of grant funding, but in all honesty, like if from my perspective on like the Air Board or the MTC, a lot of the focus is on vulnerable, you know, care communities, and we don't qualify for that. So I just don't see the funding opportunities as much. And then the question would be, yeah, can we work with the county or clean energy or, you know, some of these other larger agencies that also may have the capacity to do this in-house too, so that we don't have to spend the funding to do it. That's my question.
The
It's a
county
long
has
question, sorry, but-
a countywide vulnerability analysis.
Mhm.
And so what ours would be just more granularity. So if you think about flooding, for example, like inland flooding especially, we do have pretty robust mapping for sea level rise related flooding, but along our waterways, maybe
And I'm
there's
seeing,
less.
I thought we had done that with the water district when we did the flood basin at McKelvey. Like, I'm so sure they had that data.
Well, they do have that data for 100-year floods.
Right.
But what we're concerned about is that the 100-year flood isn't a good measure anymore. And so when you have a climate variability vulnerability, they try and figure out, okay, what should we be looking at? What's reasonable? And that's different. So
Yeah, well, and I guess I would ask then, shouldn't the water district be doing that? You know?
Or even FEMA, right? Like all
Yeah.
the ways that we predict floods historically,
Mhm.
it's all historic based.
Sure.
Well,
Yes.
And then-
except that,
They
to
should
get in,
also-
to get, the water district deals with the idea of flooding that comes out of a creek.
Mhm.
That's what the water district models.
Right.
A city deals with how do we get water to the creek? That's what we really worry about. Our storm drain system is traditionally, they were designed to carry the 10-year storm. Now, so everybody's all over the world are undersized. Ours are no different. They're undersized.
Okay.
So the question is, what does a new size need to be? And we don't need that. We don't know that. So that's a question that a vulnerability analysis would help.
And where is that? Is that typically done by cities or is everybody now required to do that? So
Well,
would it be done
eventually,
at some of them?
everybody will be required to do it, but I don't know of any ongoing funding source. It's so, I mean.
Every
it's-
city will be required to do it or some other entity will
I'm
take it on
not sure
for
how
every
we're gonna
city?
handle it. That's a really
Just
good
wait
question
until there's an
because,
emergency. and
because our
find out.
stormwater regulations are all dealt with by a
Mhm.
regional board,
Yes,
Regional Water
yeah.
Quality Control Board.
So-
And so,
Are they
that's-
the people who do that kind of
Well,
I
vulnerability?
think
They
they
might-
will have to
But they've
come up with
trickled
those
down all of
regulations.
the
But they-
green infrastructure requirements onto.
Right.
yeah, they've trickled them all down to the city. So I think it's I mean, this isn't a lot of money.
No, it's
But-
not,
But I think that it's probably a good investment. The other thing is to have, outside eyes look at it and say, these are the things that are the most serious in your community. From our professional outside, viewpoint, could be, there will probably be some places that there are discrepancies between what they think are the most difficult ones and what we think. And that might be pretty thought provoking. That would be valuable. So I don't know. I guess to me, this isn't a huge contract. So I'm not as,
So I'm gonna let that go into comments. I'm gonna
Yeah,
allow,
okay.
because too many
Oh,
questions
we're
and
supposed to
comments are
have-
very
we're supposed to have
overlapping,
public-
but,
yeah, we're supposed to have public.
but now we'll have public comment and then we'll go back to our discussion. So. Bruce?
Thank you for another 3 minutes. I am supportive of this measure, and since the conversation seems to have turned toward vulnerability, let me just share a few thoughts about that. So I know that there was a very significant flood in Mountain View near Miramonte and Cuesta in the 1950s, which led to the construction of the cross canal from Permanente to Stevens Creek. Too bad they didn't get that done before the flood, but once they learned how vulnerable that part of town was to flooding, they did something about it. The McKelvey Detention Basin, also a proactive flood control measure. Yay. I just got my property insurance. It went up 35%. I wonder why Travelers Insurance thinks that I'm more at risk than I was last year. Possibly it's because of more high wind days. So as the inland climate heats up, the difference between the temperature of the ocean, the temperature of Sacramento Valley increases and wind speed increases. I do a lot of my own yard work, and so I'm out and about in the afternoons, and I recognize that it is windier than it used to be. Oakland just dodged a bullet. They didn't have another giant Oakland Hills fire last week, but I remember the Oakland Hills fire like it was yesterday. It seemed like the entire city was going to burn down. The wind was blowing from east to west toward the, not the hills, but to the flats where I used to live. That could happen here. And in fact, in Los Altos Hills, they're talking about requiring property owners to make defensible space quite some distance from the walls of their homes. I've cut back the trees that touch my house, but I don't have a big enough yard to do the kind of defensible space that is required in Los Altos Hills or may someday be required in Mountain View. As I walk down the Stevens Creek Trail, I notice that we have a river with a dike on either side, and there could be conditions that would cause that dike to give way and potentially flooding if it goes to the Google side, a bunch of nice new buildings that don't have their own barriers built in. So that riverine flooding is probably more of a big deal in the short term and more unpredictable than sea level flooding. And then there's the vulnerability of specific populations. People who live in rent stabilized apartments are going to be very hard pressed to get the kind of climate control internally that those of us who own our own homes or are in a condo or in non-rent stabilized apartments might be able to get. We're going to have to come up with a really creative way to move large amounts of money toward the owners of rent stabilized apartments so that they can put in electrified appliances replacing the natural gas ones that they have today. So those are just some of the vulnerabilities that I see, and it's a very good thing that the city is thinking about assessing them locally to make sure that we know what's likely to happen or potentially likely to happen.
Thank you. Do we have any virtual speakers?
Mary Daytio.
Mary?
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to reinforce what Bruce said. As a landscape designer, I've been to a number of short trainings on fire danger and firescaping. And one of the things they talk about is that fire embers can spread up, a mile or more with the wind. So you get an ember in the air and it can travel, it can like leapfrog over large areas and get caught up, for example, underneath the eaves of your house and cause damage. So I have been personally wondering quite a bit lately about fire danger and if it is something I should be concerned about. And I want to echo also what Bruce said about the importance of cooling to in the rent controlled apartments, because between fires which cause so much smoke that people need to stay indoors with their windows closed, and the more recent heat events. So if the vulnerability assessment is going to include a study, for example, of how many buildings have any kind of cooling or don't, it seems like a really good thing to know in order to understand where you might target some remediation efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more virtual speakers? Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to the committee for discussion and conclusions.
Sure, I
Committee
can
members
start.
want to say more?
So again, thank you for doing this. I overall support it. I think it's much more focused and to the point. I know it's only $80,000, but I guess for me, I was looking at this and then the next item and the rebate or the idea of a rebate is what I was looking at. And if we could give, $1,000 per person and help 80 more people get a water pump water heater. To me, that's tangible. It's actually giving it to the residents who, have been very supportive of our efforts. And that's how I was looking at this. So even the $200,000 that we're saving here, if we can, I'd like to see, I need your support, but, move it over to that campaign because I really think that we have to just start doing some tangible things here. And that's, I feel their sense of urgency. And so that was really why I was asking about this. I understand and it is helpful and important. I guess my question was again, I think there are other agencies that should be doing this, frankly, like the water district. So how much of it is it really, the city us having to do this versus can we put that money toward a different project, like giving more rebates for heat pump water heaters. That was really it. But, if the majority supports this, I'm fine to go.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm supportive. I think the information that we get will be valuable. And I also think it will be good for when you have a report that you can cite about a subject like this. It is helpful in getting more points for grants. And that's how we leverage money. So I think for both of those reasons, the real information we'll get and how it'll be useful for leveraging for grants, I'm supportive.
So I'm actually kind of leaning towards putting the money towards rebates because because that's just what I found. I find that that's what holds people back. And I feel a little wrongheaded talking about this before the next agenda item. But I don't see people who are even very, very concerned making the change until burnout and until there are rebates and mandates. Otherwise, people are just waiting around and wondering what to do. So I don't really want to throw a wrench in it. I'll wait for someone else to make a motion. Because I do, it's not a lot of money. I find value in both, but I really would like to move decisively on decarbonization as rapidly as we can.
Is there a way that we can both increase the amount of money in the rebate program and do this? Or are the two mutually, is it really an either or can we recommend both?
I'm happy to.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That's a question. Can we,
Or another question would be, is there, a scaled back vulnerability analysis and some more, like a lot of rearranging?
Or can we do it in-house? I have to pay a consultant to do it,
The vulnerability analysis, I don't think we could do in-house because some of it is detailed modeling. So when we did it for the county, the heat island effect, the models produced unanticipated results because of the way that the heat interacts with the hill, the spine of San Mateo County, which also kind of continues down through Mountain View. So it actually was fairly detailed analysis to get this data about like what it might look like at a local level. So we wouldn't be able to do that kind of heat island effect analysis, for example. In answer to the question about the funds, though, we do have the reduced amount with the contract, and then the next item that's coming does include funds from a different allocation of money. So we could move money within the sustainability action plan to increase the heat pump water heater rebate assessment, or we could come back, we could just reserve the funds that we aren't putting towards this contract. And then as soon as we start to run low for the heat pump water heater campaign, we can come back to CSC with a request to move the funds over at that time to be able to continue the program. So
I have an additional question. Are cities around us doing this, like Sunnyvale and Palo Alto, like vulnerability analysis? Would there be a way to pair with them and do something that would be, you know, a little bit bigger? Los Altos Hills.
Most of the cities already have one.
Oh, really? Who
Uh,
doesn't?
That's a good
Pair with
question,
them?
yeah. But yeah, just to echo what Danielle said before, we do have a lot of the data through the county vulnerability assessment. So some of it will be like compiling that and figuring out what do we need to like update or make more specific to Mountain View. I just also wanted to add about the funding that, you know, at the next meeting in November, we were gonna go over the sustainability action plan progress, including like what funding we have left over, and so that might be a good time to discuss like if we want to put more funding into incentives and stuff.
Okay, further discussion, motion?
I move the staff recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
I,
It's unanimous. But I assume that we will also be coming back with the possibility of more money as money runs out. That's the next item. And maybe we can also find out what other city might not have a vulnerability
Can
analysis.
look into it.
What other neighbor? Okay, so now we'll be moving on to 5.2, which is the Year of the Water Heater campaign. And this item will be presented by Ms. Ramos.
Thank you. I'm Whitney Ramos, sustainability analyst focusing on outreach and engagement. The background of this is familiar to everyone here. We're working towards achieving community decarbonization. Our annual greenhouse gas emissions inventories consistently show building energy as the second largest source of emissions. And from this chart that we've all seen before, we can see how important switching from natural gas to electricity has been and will continue to be to reach decarbonization. And switching to electrification, is needed and it can be complicated. So through more focused conversations and messages, the Year of the Water Heater campaign aims to achieve deeper engagement. Studies show that people are more likely to switch to electric around the home if they already have experienced using an electric appliance, and staff sees heat pump water heaters as being a strong gateway technology. Why heat pump water heaters? Water heating is the second largest use of energy in the home, averaging 18% of a home's energy use. The installation process is less expensive and less complicated to install than space heating. The 2027 Bay Area Air Quality Management District regulations prohibit new sales of gas water heaters, making it a higher first priority for homeowners to get future ready. And Silicon Valley Clean Energy has been and will continue launching programs that can back up Year of the Water Heater messaging with programmatic and technical assistance. The goals and intended outcomes would be to increase the number and rate of heat pump water heaters installed in Mountain View, to raise awareness and understanding of electrification and heat pump water heaters, reach new audiences with division messaging that have not been receiving sustainability messaging recently, and create excitement, interest, and word of mouth buzz around heat pump water heaters. Single-family and condominium homeowners will be prioritized for outreach and engagement as they can readily make decisions about changes to the equipment in their homes. Homes with solar are particularly strong candidates for heat pump water heaters, along with some other characteristics that we have identified. And families with children may be more motivated to transition for health and safety reasons. The campaign elements proposed include developing a heat pump water heater mascot to use in displays and communications. Watson can be dressed up with seasonal and popular culture references for people to connect with. He can also be featured in educational fun activities such as plush stuffed animal with heat pump facts on his tag, or an educational coloring book. Next, the campaign would amplify Silicon Valley clean energy heat pump water heater programs locally. There's on-bill financing pilots, a pilot, direct installation program with an emergency loaner, and then of course the Go Electric Advisor for technical assistance to further support and make the year robust for participants. Lastly, on this slide, a Mountain View incentive program for replacing gas-fired water heaters with heat pump water heaters would bring installation costs to parity with gas, would be a temporary 1-year incentive during the year of the water heater. And the concept is for it to be streamlined and stackable with SVCEs. So it's not adding extra barriers and really supporting those who have not and otherwise may not transition in the next year. Keep it in mind the campaign goals of reaching new audiences. Other campaign elements proposed are placing advertisements through methods that we do not use as much in local government. So geographically targeted streaming and audio ads so that we know they're only reaching Mountain View residents. A preview at the local movie theater and photo and digital ads seen outside the home are some examples of that. Additionally, we would like to send quarterly mailers direct to those who we've identified have characteristics where they're more likely to switch, as well as potentially in bulk to all Mountain View homeowners. An additional campaign element is the in-person outreach themed for the year of the water heater. Beyond our traditional annual events, which we would continue to do, such as farmers markets, tying in with youth events to build that excitement within the family, and exploring door-to-door via contracting with a local nonprofit. Lastly, residents would be invited to participate in the Year of the Water Heater Challenge, where they could win prizes and prepare step-by-step to convert their own water heater to heat pump. Throughout and at the end of the program, we would evaluate methods and determine which have been most effective. These could include city permit numbers and or Mountain View specific incentive data, as well as the SVCE program data, who for Mountain View is taking the rebates and participating in their programs. We can also use trackable QR codes on the media to see which methods are getting more attention, and use surveys and case studies to evaluate if the level of education has increased over the year. Our discussion question for you today is does the CSC have feedback on the activities and or the proposed incentive for Year of the Water Heater? Thank you.
So committee members, do you have questions?
Yeah, I have a short list here. Okay, so what's the difference in cost to operate a heat pump water heater versus a gas one? I think people care about costs. Do we know what that is?
So there's been studies done for, when we've done reach codes about what's the cost difference on utility. You're asking about the bill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like a few years ago, it was like $1 savings for a single family home that was kind of older. But the technology has obviously increased, like you've got the 140 heat pump water heater. So, there is some modest savings.
But it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, for the utility bill.
Yeah, well, that would
It
be,
depends again, like when you're home with adults, and how energy efficient it is.
okay, well, anyway, that's something I think would be, generally of interest to people about how much are they gonna save a lot of money with this? Or maybe that's not the factor, maybe the factor. And then the other one is,
Even if it's a little savings.
even if it's a little. savings.
Like you save 10 cents when you don't get the paper bag.
Yeah.
In our conversations with people at tabling events, I think we haven't heard anything about the water heater transition. When people, usually they like it, they don't have any issue. It's the space heating where they start to notice differences in their bill. We hear a lot on that topic.
Okay, and then I think something that would be really good to have as part of this? Or do we have a kind of a graphic that shows what are all the piece parts to making this switch? Because, you know, most of us who've grown up with gas water heaters, when you wait until your water heater dies, and then you call a plumber and they come and put one in that day, right? So you're uninterrupted, you know, you don't have hot water for like maybe 8 hours. Well, we know with an electric one, that can be more of a problem. And I remember there was something in here about working with contractors that had borrowable water heaters and that kind of thing, so I think, you know, that's one of the questions that I hope we'll be able to answer is how, what would the, you know, what is the process and how can this run smoothly? And, you know, hopefully there'll be pictures. I love the idea of Watson. That was so cute. And then the other thing I think that a lot of people do care about is what is the greenhouse gas reduction? You know, you said it was 18% of a family's use. That's a lot. But I think people would all, you know, it'd be nice, like it's the same as taking 2 cars off the road, or I don't know, but you know, we see infographics of these things. And but questions. Okay, another question. One question. The question is part of this to reach out to water heater contractors? How would we include them in the conversation and the education?
We originally included contractors in the scope and removed it to have the scope be more focused. We would also like to work with contractors locally to increase their knowledge and understand their barriers that they're facing as well. It's a really dispersed group that we need to continue strategizing on how best to connect with.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Yes, if it's okay. So along those lines, that was what I hear is the contractors, when they come, they say, oh, don't do the heat pump. I know that SPCE has, like, we have that certification program that, so again, we work with them to make sure that our contractors here are not trying to direct residents to the traditional. And then I think with the loaner program that SPCE is instituting, that should be helpful. I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but along the lines, I thought about that. But my other question was the rebate. So it looks like it's $200,000. The estimated cost for gas is $2,000 to $3,500. And to replace that to a heat water pump is $7,000. So are we going to give a rebate based on the cost of the individuals? Like, are we trying to close that gap? Or are we trying to just say, okay, this is $1,000 per person or per household? How are we going to
We're trying to
distribute that?
close the gap, and so we're exploring conversations with SBCE to see if they can help us administer the
Okay.
program so that they're looking at the receipts to go through and figure out,
How much it is? Okay.
but I mean, if they're eligible and the cost is, $7,000 and we match it with another $2,000, they're likely to get the whole $4,000 back.
Yes, that was my question. Are we trying to give them the full
Yeah.
difference? Okay, great, thank you.
So my question is how you've been thinking about working with this burnout. Like most people aren't spending their weekends shopping for water heaters. Despite your talk about creating a buzz, like for most people, it probably doesn't have much of a buzz no matter what you do. So usually one buys a water heater when one's water heater breaks. And so I would hate to pass, but when your water heater breaks, all of a sudden you really want to go shopping for a water heater. So I would hate to miss those people because So is there any way that you're thinking of working with those people, finding those people? Like people with older water heaters? Has there been any talk about how to, or just blanketing everyone so that they know it's available? Because I'm not sure that the most likely people are people with kids. I think it's people with broken water heaters. That's the most likely people. So has there been any discussion of that?
So we've been approaching it with the idea of trying to reach people before it breaks so that they have a concept of this is out there, here's what I would need to do. And they've started thinking about it before their water heater actually goes out. And then with the challenge where we break it down step by step. And then hopefully beyond that, we can get people to start thinking about, wow, my water heater is way past its actual life. So.
Yeah, is there a way of checking in on that? Like,
Yes.
okay, what is that?
Well, we would have to, the people have to do it themselves, but we want to promote people to just start to think about how old it is, right? Look at the serial
Say,
number.
like, is your water heater over? I don't even know what.
Their lifespan is supposed to be about 10 years, but everyone I've ever talked to has an older water heater, except maybe the Carbon Free Mountain View electric heat pumps.
Yeah, so it would be, the question would be, is your water heater over 10 years old? You might want to check in, et cetera, et cetera.
But I would like to think about if there's additional ways we could get into that process when we know people are shopping. And the permit conversations have been useful. Trying to work with building to let the community know more about the options that are available.
But are you telling me that there's a way to check permits to see who has old water heaters?
No, sorry.
Oh, that would be excellent. If you just send notices out to people with old water heaters.
No, we've been brainstorming with
Okay.
community development about ways to try to start to get this information. And of course, as people put in electric heat pump water heaters, in some cases, do they not require limits for that? So then we will start to have data prospectively, which will be helpful because we'll start to see who's left, you know. The only thing I was going to add was the loaner program through SVCE, really promoting that.
Yeah.
And partnering with
Yeah,
them
that's
to make sure that awareness is increased about that availability.
So then, my last question on this is, maybe I was confused when you said closing the gap. Is that the gap between, so if my water heater is not broken and I just decide to go out and do this because it's a good thing to do, then in some ways I'm looking at that expense differently than if I'm looking at like buying this thing I don't really need right now. It's different if my water heater breaks. I'm already like, I'm out. I don't know what water heater costs, but if I was gonna. $3,000, okay. If I was gonna just replace my gas heater, I'd be like, I'm out $3,000. And then I'd be like, my husband would say, hey, we got this flyer for this program where we can get a heat pump one instead. And I'm like, but that costs more money. And it's like, but you can close the gap. That's when the gap comes in, right? When you're deciding to buy one anyway. No, it's always,
Essentially, I mean,
guess.
from the outreach and the mailers, and we were trying to put forward all the information like the emergency replacement or the loaner gas water heater until you can get your wires where they need to be, plug in the heat pump
right.
water heater. It's gonna be, I mean, that's the challenge, right? It's hard to get somebody like right when they're breaking
Right.
and knowing kind of where, but hopefully with the SVC programs and pushing the emergency loaner program, or even the direct install. So that's the program SVC is going to be launching early next year. They have a soft launch that's been going on for the last few months where you can call and somebody will come out and replace your water heater essentially at a fixed price, the $7,000. Or you can use your trusted contractor and go through that process. Yeah, I'd say, it's going to be tricky. I mean, the point is to get, hopefully we think like the thing that's going to get people motivated is the 2027 back bid rule. Because if you're thinking about selling your house, if you're thinking about anything about the work, you're going to want to take the steps to position yourself so you're not scrambling, trying to find a gas water heater that's no longer sold in the Bay Area.
So the step is to let people know about that. And then to get people to check the age of their water heater and maybe get them pre-wired. And then get the kind of maybe those 4 steps.
Yeah, and even if we got into the pre-wire stage, because SBC does offer rebates for that as well. I
Okay.
mean, that's still a win. It's when their water
I'm
heater
getting
goes
more
out,
of
they'll
a
be able
clear
to.
picture for somebody whose water heater is still functioning.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, more questions or should we move on to comments from the public? Okay, are there any comments from the public? Bruce Kearney.
Yes, a 3 for 3 night. I'm so excited. So I want to offer some thoughts about the transition we're going through with electric heat pump water heaters. 2 years ago, they were all 240 volt appliances, which typically meant you needed at least a new circuit, maybe even a new sub panel. Now there are a lot of good 120 volt appliances, and this is how a plumber gives you hot water the day that your old one breaks. He just plugs it into the same outlet that your washing machine or whatever, something nearby, and you're good until more extensive work can be done, if more extensive work needs to be done. That's the beauty of the 120 volt solution. But let me talk about incentives. What staff is proposing is simple, but it has the danger that any incentive has, which is people wait till the last minute. And the last minute here is Christmas week, which is perhaps not when you want to have people rushing into the building department. I didn't read the staff report, so I don't know if you incent based on pulling a permit or installing, but in either case, December is not really the greatest time to do either of those things. When the state of California introduced the Million Solar Roofs Initiative, they borrowed an incentive concept from Japan, which gave ever decreasing rebates in 10 steps, going from the 100% rebate, the $2.50 per kilowatt rebate down to 25 cents. So it was a 90% reduction over time. And it wasn't a time-based reduction, it was a volume reduction. So the state knew exactly how much it was going to spend on the 1,000 Million Solar Roofs Initiative rebates. It just didn't know when it would spend it. They expected it to take 10 years to use up all the money, but in fact, it took about 6 or 7 because there was more rapid uptake of solar than they had anticipated. So that's one way to make sure that exactly the amount of money the city allocates is exactly the amount of money that is given in rebates, but you don't know exactly how long it will take. The other thought is that you could do a rebate based on the age of your water heater. So if you have a 9-year-old water heater, give them a really big rebate because that is the market that you really want to get to before their water heater fails. And if they have a 1-year-old water heater, but because they're very ecologically conscious, they want to replace it right now. Well, you know, they're ecologically conscious. They don't need a big rebate to move them. And one other twist is for a 2-family home like mine, we only use 2 people's worth of water. I'm sorry, not 2 people. If you have somebody with 8 people in the dwelling, they're going to use 4 times the water that we are. And the greenhouse gas reduction from a water heater would be 4 times greater than the greenhouse gas reduction from our water heater, which, by the way, is for a 2-person household, it's about a metric ton of CO2 equivalent. And the cost was about the same, electricity versus gas, but there are new rate programs coming from PG&E and SVCE that might tilt it a little bit towards saving money.
Thank you. Any virtual comments?
Bruce England.
Bruce?
Thank you. Yeah, Bruce England, Lisbon Station Drive. This is a very interesting discussion. And I've got a lot of questions and comments. So I might turn a bunch of these over following to the sustainability team so people don't have to try to jot these down. I don't know how much I can even get into 3 minutes, but as many things are in life, this is all complicated. There are a lot of things to think about. And even what Bruce Kearney said in the last agenda item about insurance rates going up comes into play. We all need to spend our money on different things, and we have to do that sort of cost benefit analysis and what can we afford to do. So this is something I want to do, but personally, my water heater is only a couple of years old. And so I am kind of in that bucket of wanting to wait it out and wait until I get closer to 10 years. But I also am trying to go through this, getting solar panels installed. It's been a real nightmare. I think as some of you already know from my experience when I've talked with you about it. and just getting things permitted and allowed. I'm in an HOA, and so I have to deal with the HOA as well. So when at one point my water heater, I had to get a permit in order for it to be secured properly in case of an earthquake. So there was that. And then with the solar panels, it's how, what is my service level at the panel? And is it high enough for me to add these extra things? Well, that's pretty low in my situation. And so I'm kind of wrangling with the with planning over that. And if you add an electric water heater to that, I'm not sure it's going to work. So even if I can do, 120-volt heater, it might be over what I can possibly get allowed, say through the permitting people. And also another practical matter is, as tempting as it would be to run an extension cord from my outlet, convenient outlet over to the water heater, I'm sure that will not be allowed, nor would it be a good idea. So I'm going to have to get new wiring installed because there's not an outlet next to the water heater. Why would there be? So there are, so I'm leaving a lot out here. I'll throw in one last thing, which is renters. I didn't see that in the staff report, and I didn't hear in discussion unless I missed it. What sort of incentives will be applied to multifamily communities where renters have very limited say in what can be bought? It would be nice to be able to have these things considered in those locations too. I have plenty else, and I'm just going to put it in an email or something and send it over to sustainability team, and maybe I will copy you members as well, in case you're interested. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
Kehandra.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I have just a small question regarding to the electric water heater, whether we do have a detailed action plan based on the data. What I mean is that whether we know the number of gas water heaters existing in Mountain View, and how many of them are going to to be redundant or going to end their life on each year, so that in each year how many gas water heaters will be required to be replaced with the electric water heater. So based on that sort of data, I think if we do have a detailed action plan, that will provide us some sort of information regarding how much the financial resources we need, and how much human resources that we will need. If we do have that action plan, so my interest is whether we do have that sort of a detailed action plan, to replace the gas water heaters with electric water heaters or heat pump water heaters. That would be nice if we do have that kinds of action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
One more, Mary Daytu.
Mary?
Hi, good evening. I guess I'm wondering a little bit about the amount of 200,000. And so I haven't had a chance, I apologize, I haven't had a chance to do the math. So I'm sure some of this is for the development of the character and for, the outreach budget and everything else, but we have 85,000 people, so maybe 40,000 homes total. So I don't know how many of those are single family and condos and townhouses, but that's going to be a pretty sizable rebate per house, which would be great, I guess. So I guess really my real question, and maybe one of the council will ask this question, is about how many homes do we think this is going to affect? And do we think they all have gas water heaters, or what percentage of those homes actually have gas water heaters? On the outreach, I guess I'm wondering, I didn't see any mention of the neighborhood associations. I wonder if we might reach out and send an announcement via the neighborhood associations to talk about this program, either by directly contacting each neighborhood association contact and asking them to forward the message, or possibly the sustainability department would consider trying to go like neighborhood association by neighborhood association and trying to identify 1 or 2 members in each association who would be willing to forward announcements such as this occasionally. So occasionally when there are, for example, when there are city announcements that I think affect the neighborhood or be of interest to homeowners, I forward that to my whole Cuesta Park Neighborhood Association. And maybe this will be another way the Sustainability Committee could reach out. And finally, I'm wondering if you might, to get more information about the age of people's heat pump water heaters, if you might consider like having a raffle. Just saying, hey, you know, we want everybody to know how old their water heater is, so they can start planning to put an electric one in. So if you look up your water heater's age and you let us know, we'll put you in for the raffle and have a nice big prize. I'm have to word it so it doesn't sound too creepy, but but you know, maybe that would work. So at least you get an idea of how better idea of ages and how many people. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more speakers? Oh, one more speaker.
Yes, hello. I didn't realize I had a comment until I heard. A friend of mine in Cupertino is low income, and she and her mother were able to utilize the rebates, and they were able to go electric. They were able to, for about the same cost as it would cost to replace their gas line, they were able to go to a heat pump water pump, and also a heat pump for their air. So it was very good. So I support us having more programs for that will help people who are not able to afford things like that easily.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm John Scarborough, Mountain View resident.
Okay, last call for speakers of any sort. No more speakers. So do we have, I'm gonna first ask the question that some of the people, virtual people brought up, but do we have we run numbers on an estimate for how many water heaters we're talking about? And
Yeah, I mean, so we're still working through kind of some of the numbers of like how far we can get the funds to go, but for example, if we were to match what SVC is currently offering, so they offer $2,000 for a heat pump water heater, we could match that with another 2,000. And if it was the case, then we could do up to 100 water heaters likely.
so there are way more water heaters in Mountain View than we would be. And do we have any estimate of how many, or we don't need to bother because we're doing so few? 20,000.
Oh, yeah, I think we have 45,000 units in the city and 40% is single family homes. So that's, what is that, 16,000 homes? And then yeah, condos are on top of that, so.
If I may just add to what Ms. Lucky said, in some ways, we're looking ahead at some of the regulations that are already coming that will affect the entire Bay Area, as you know, the air district's ban on sale of gas appliances, including water heating. And so in some ways, this is a way to bridge our community to that ban on the sale of those appliances in 2027. So that the transition
at
is
that
smooth
point,
for our
We
community,
won't
right?
need the same kind of incentive.
Exactly. So we don't anticipate being able to actually fulfill all of the need for the community, but we want to make it a smoother process to transition to that market, have contractors that are better aware of it, have neighbors that have already made that transition, just to kind of seed that so that when 2027 comes, it's smoother for us.
Okay, so are there comments or maybe questions that were triggered?
I do have another question. Do we have any statistics on how many water heaters are changed every year in Singapore? Do we know that?
I don't know, sorry. Oh, yes, we have permit data that we're currently synthesizing. So we don't have all the data, but we have the water heaters that have applied for permits. So we're currently analyzing the
Okay.
electrification data. Yeah.
So I'm sure it's more than 100 a year, but I don't know that.
I can check while we're speaking, actually. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I guess my comment is that, I do think this is a really good idea. And part of the reason that we want to have an incentive program is we have heard tales that the permitting doesn't move as smoothly as it should. And we want to get people to work through the system. And of course, they're more inspired to do that if they're going to get a good rebate, so that we get the permitting process smoothed out. And so I feel like it's, that's part of why we want to do this, is we want to have enough experience so that we've encountered all the glitches and, or many of them, and we know how to work through them. So I think this is a really good idea. I also like the idea of adding more money if we need it. I know, at the water district, we had, rebate programs for buying turf. And it depended on the year, but sometimes it was really, really popular, and we ran out of the money, like in a couple of months. And so if that were to happen, I would certainly be interested in, can we find money to continue this for the rest of the year, or what's the situation? So I would be very interested. I think it's a good idea.
We would be thrilled to be coming back to you. If the demand for heat pump water heaters was so great that we needed to add more money, that would be excellent.
Yeah.
More comments? Yes, so yeah, I'm very excited about this. I would definitely, if we can, recommend that $200,000 savings from the first item over. I guess I was looking if we could get to $500,000, just a nice round number would be ideal, because I know it depends on the amount of rebate. I was just thinking, should we do a flat $1,000 and get 500 water heaters out? But I'd leave that up to you to decide if that closing that entire gap is more important than getting more folks out, more houses done. But just some thoughts. Oh, and then actually Bruce Carney's comments, and then what you were saying about this sort of hiding people over until 2027 when we have our ban. What if we did it then by prioritizing the old water heaters? So go by age, and we can, start with that question, how old your water heater is, and then if it's like 10 years or older, we prioritize them first, and then see where we are with the rest of the funding. And then in terms of marketing, I think the most effective right now, just based on my recent experience, digital ads. I know we have YouTube channel for the city, but definitely that seems to be very effective. I think door to door is really the most effective. I've been walking other cities, and I've actually noticed they're doing a similar campaign, and they have these door hangers that I see on a lot of doors. Neighborhood associations came up. What about our Cool Block members and getting them to do door to door as a volunteer effort before we go to have to pay people to do it? And then I would say the one thing with farmers markets is that there's actually a lot of non-residents in Mountain View at those farmers markets. So it's really the city events, the neighborhood association events. And then finally, I think door to door would be helpful, because we might need to have those conversations with folks. So to have that in-depth discussion, that folks will probably have a lot of questions. So those would be, and then social digital, like talk, suggestion, marketing. Thanks.
So let me add to that. I also think we should be using the council neighborhood committee more, as because we give little speeches there, and a poster, or somebody, maybe one crew tabling there. It's usually some pretty active community members, and I think we don't use it enough. As I think about this, it seems like because there's a ban in 2027, really the most important thing you're doing is making sure that the permitting is that all of that functions smoothly for when everybody has to do it anyway. The more I think about it, if everybody has to do it, but after 2027, we don't really need to, be paying everybody to do it now. Maybe there are better things to save that money for. Anyway, I'm supportive in general of this, and doing outreach and getting people started so that we can work through permitting problems, and then maybe coming back later with like you spoke about with additional incentive, or maybe the incentive would be better reserved for something else like heat pump space heating or something else.
Well, it's under the appliance
Under
ban
the-
too, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so do we need a motion here? Let's see. Or we're just rolling forward with this. Doesn't say anything about a motion, but we can let or you don't need.
We just would like the committee to receive the information and then to provide feedback.
Okay, well, we've done that.
I would just, I mean, I said it a little earlier, but I would just, the more I think about it, echo that. But one of the goals of this program, besides inspiring people to make this change, is really to work the kinks out. of it.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I'm sure you've talked about that a lot, but that's really a big deal.
Yeah.
Because, if you can get these things, if we get it figured out and the word goes out that it's not that, it's not a problem, then that's just is hugely important.
Yes.
Whereas if the word goes out that it's really a pain in the neck and you want to avoid it at all costs, I mean, that's so counterproductive. So we really want to get that, the permitting ironed out.
I agree.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, so we've completed this item. We've heard the information and given feedback. We are now on item number 6, which is committee staff comments, questions, and committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the CSC at this time. Do any CSC members or staff have comments or questions?
Well, I'd just like to, take this opportunity to thank the sustainability staff for helping to host the meeting that we had last Wednesday on the sea level rise, on sea level rise protections for Santa Clara County. And we really had a great turnout. We had people from all of the 5 shoreline cities as well as NASA. So I thought that was pretty. Several council members, yeah, several council members came, and we had good presentations and discussion. So I really thought it was a big success. I just thank you so much for helping to put that on.
I second that as well. Any other reports? Yes.
Sustainability will be at the city's Dia de Muertos celebration this Saturday with an ofrenda honoring past sustainability leaders. So we look forward to seeing the community at that wonderful city event.
Thank you. Exciting. Okay, so we now move on to item number 7, which is adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 7:22.
Text in.